Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm so excited to get started with you guys here tonight. And so tonight, of course, we're going through our next generation workshop. And so a little bit about myself before we get started, in case you are a guest here on the line tonight. My name is Dr. Elise, and I am the owner of Vitality Family Chiropractic. And so our mission here in our office is really just to spread health with every single person in this community. And that really does start with our kids, which is why I'm so excited to go through this information with regards to the next generation and getting the next generation healthy. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up our PowerPoint here and share my screen with you guys. I got a little bit ahead of myself. All right, so here we go. And give me just a second here. And so comment right now, just so I can make sure that you guys can see my screen. If you could comment right now. And let me know that you can see that. That would be super helpful. Not yet. Okay. Let's try that. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you can see it now. Yes, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and blow this up for you guys. Perfect. Okay, so what we're talking about tonight, of course, is Max Kids. And so let's go ahead and get right into it. So again, just a little bit about our vision. A lot of you have heard my story about my grandfather and how I do what I do because of my grandpa, Ed. And when I was in high school, my grandpa moved in with my family because his health was so bad, he couldn't take care of himself anymore. And so I saw a man who I loved more than anything really deteriorate almost overnight. And what started as back pain for him ended up in kidney failure and liver failure. And every single time something went wrong with his health, the only thing I ever saw given to him was a pill. And so the reason I do what I do and the reason, we do all of these workshops is because I never want anyone to end up like my grandpa. And also when it comes to talking about generational health, what I wouldn't give to be able to sit down as a woman with my grandfather just to get to know him. And so my hope is that through these workshops, we really get to give people generational health. We get to have, grandmothers knowing grandkids and great grandmothers knowing great grandkids. And that's what it's about. And all of that comes back to the way that we're treating our body. And so the vision that we like to say in the office is less pharmacies and more farmers markets. It's less medications and more meditation. It's less sick days and more family days and less hospitals and more going to the gym. And so that's the idea behind everything that we do here in the office. And so here's the first question that I want to start out with. If there was one thing that you could do right now that would radically change the course of your child's health, would you do it? And the answer is hands down, yes, for every single one of us. And I want you to know that there's not just one thing, there are multiple things that you can be doing right now that will radically change the course of your child's health. And if you can do all of them, if you can master all of them, not only for you, but for your child, you'll see a big difference in the path that your family tree has taken. In the office this week on our whiteboard and on our Facebook group, if you're not a part of it, it's Vitality Family Chiropractic Health Warriors. Get on there. There's a lot of good information. But a quote that I shared was, if you didn't come from a healthy family, make sure a healthy family comes from you. I'm going to say that again. If you didn't come from a healthy family, that's okay. But make sure a healthy family comes from you. That, I believe, is our duty and our obligation. And so one of the reasons I'm so excited to have kids is because I know that that's kind of a clean slate for teaching a child to approach the world in a little bit of a different way, in a way that I know my mom wishes she could have taught me. And so one of my favorite questions to ask people when they come into the office is, when when do you wish you would have started taking care of yourself? And of course, the answer is always years and years and years ago, as soon as possible. And so you have that opportunity, if you have babies or grandbabies that you can influence, to get them to love working out, to get them to know that I just don't eat junk food because it doesn't fuel my body, to expose them to chiropractic and let them know that taking care of your nervous system is important. So there's such an opportunity in being around children in that way. And I do want to kind of give a little bit of just a disclaimer. So while I don't have children, I do know a lot about health in general. And so a lot of what we're going to go through here tonight are basic principles that you can apply to you and your family's health. But please understand that an ideal world is always far from the real world. So especially if you're a mom or a dad right now and you're sitting on the couch and your little ones are running around screaming and you're trying to just get whatever you can from this presentation, that is okay. And so do what you can and do the best you can. That's all we ask. And if you have any questions, of course, ask me here tonight or ask me in general in the office. So let's start by talking about chronic disease. And this statistic blows my mind. Right now, 1 in 4 kids suffers from a chronic disease. So 25% of the kids in America suffer from a chronic disease. And I'm not talking about infectious diseases like getting the flu or getting chicken pox. I'm talking about a chronic disease, which is defined as something that directly interferes with the child's life, activities of daily living for at least 3 months out of the year, and requires significant medical attention or even hospitalization. That is 1 in 4 kids who suffer with that. 5% of kids have more than one chronic disease, which is, again, just absolutely astounding to me. And when we look at what those chronic diseases are, the top chronic diseases among kids these days are asthma, diabetes, obesity, ADHD, depression, and malnutrition. Now, the crazy part about especially asthma, diabetes, obesity, ADHD, and probably even depression is these are chronic diseases that we didn't see when our parents were growing up. We didn't see this when our grandparents were growing up. And so to me, that always begs the question, why? Why are these chronic diseases only rising every single year? And now, why are they starting to affect our kids? And when we dive into it, we realize all of this is based on how we're living our lives. And so it's based on the lifestyle choices that we make, and it's based on our habits. And I know that this is a harsh statement, but your habits are the habits that your kids are watching. And so if you have bad habits, if you eat bad foods, I promise you, your kids are watching you, and those are the habits that you're giving them. And so this is not just for you, but it's for the kids in your life too, that we make sure that we're not passing these bad habits along and setting kids up for asthma, diabetes, obesity, ADHD, depression, and malnutrition. Now, the good news is with all of these, the literature shows that 80 to 95% of cases are 100% reversible when you start to live your life the right way. And that's what we're going to dive into here tonight. And so, of course, your children are the greatest gift that you've ever been given. And so we want to give them back the gift of prevention. And I think that's a really key word when it comes to kids, prevention. It is way easier to raise a healthy child than it is to fix a sick adult. And so people come in all the time and they say, Dr. Elise, how long is it going to take for me to heal? And that's a really great question. And so most of the time, first I ask people, well, how long have you been dealing with your symptoms? And they say, well, I've had it for, 1, 3, 5, 10 years. And then I let them know that those symptoms, the dysfunction has been there even long before those symptoms came up. And so healing takes time. So way easier to prevent a child from getting sick in the first place. And so health, of course, starts in the womb. Everything that we do when we're pregnant is passed along to our child. And so the branch of science that really studies this is called epigenetics. And so epigenetics looks at the methylation and demethylation of our DNA. And we have found that through the decisions that a mom makes, you can actually turn genes on, meaning you can cause them to be expressed, or you can turn genes off, meaning you can suppress them, which is a good thing, based on the decisions that you're making in your life. And so what affects this epigenetic component and what affects the expression of genes? Well, the way that you eat has been proven to affect this. Your stress levels, your toxicity levels, how much movement you have in your life, all of this can get passed on to the baby, and it can set the child up from womb for a life of chronic disease. And so this is where it all starts. It starts with taking care of yourself during pregnancy. And so one of the big things that I want to hit on is prenatal nutrient requirements. And so we know that there are certain nutrients that we want to give mom, and we really want to start this through supplementation. It is very difficult these days to get the nutrients that we need through what we're eating. And so our crops, because of soil depletion and a host of other things, that could be a whole other workshop, we really just don't get the nutrients through our food that we need. So it's important for everyone to supplement, but especially for prenatal women who want to get pregnant. And so the 3 nutrients that are most key out of all of them are going to be calcium, iron, and folate. And so iron is important because you start to produce more blood when you get pregnant and when you're helping the baby, of course. And with that, we want to get more oxygen to the baby with the blood, and iron helps with that oxygen. And so if you're low in iron, you can set yourself up for like iron deficiency anemia. And then calcium is important for muscles. It's important for nervous system development. And of course, it's important for bone development as well. And then one of the big ones that I think most of us know about is folate. A lot of people may or may not know the difference between folate and folic acid. And so I do want to hit on that. So folic acid is the oxidized, synthesized version of folate. Folate you get from things like leafy greens. It's very important because it helps with neural tube development. And so if you're deficient in folate, that will lead to things like spina bifida. And so it can have an impact on the development of the nervous system overall. And so we want to make sure that we are getting tons of folate, but not folic acid, folate. And so if you right now are pregnant and you are supplementing, that is one thing that you want to look into. The reason that it matters is because folic acid is metabolized different in the mom's body than folate is. And so folate is actually metabolized in the small intestine. Folic acid has to go through the liver first in a different reaction. And so with that, when you're taking a lot of it, the folic acid can build up, and that can have adverse effects on mom's health. And so we want to make sure we're doing folate and not folic acid. On the right-hand side here, I also just put some things to make sure that you're avoiding. Some of this might be common knowledge, like sushi, raw fish, seafood during pregnancy, unpasteurized milk or juice, raw or undercooked sprouts, raw cookie dough, soft cheeses. And a lot of these is because they can carry different bacteria like E. coli, listeria, salmonella, or different parasites in them. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding those things. And then just interesting and something, especially if you have been pregnant before, you probably realize in the final trimester, you require a little bit more of food intake. And so we need about 300 extra calories per day when you start to get into that final trimester, as the body is, finishing helping the baby to develop and preparing for delivery overall. And so Max Living, I'm super excited about this, but we just came out with prenatal daily essential packets. And so we used to recommend, and there's other very good brands out there. Pure Encapsulations is one of them, Designs for Health. And so those are other good brands, but now we carry this right here in the office. And this gives you everything that you need in really convenient packets. It has a prenatal multivitamin. It also has an omega, and it has a osteo blend, which helps with bone health as well. So you can check that out here in the office. So chiropractic, of course, is absolutely key during pregnancy. If you've been pregnant and had regular care during pregnancy, you know that it not only helps to alleviate pain, and so that can be back pain, that can be that pubic pain that you might get, but it also helps to decrease labor and delivery times, which is fantastic. And so, of course, when we talk about the neurology and of the lumbar spine, we want to see a nice 45-degree curve from the spine from the side, and we want your hips to be even. And so the first reason that chiropractic during pregnancy is so important is because your hips being even helps to make sure that your uterus is nice, big, and open so that the baby can not only develop, but also the baby can turn. And so if you've ever heard the term breech baby, that's a baby who has not turned head down for, a good delivery. And that can happen because the pelvis can shift and essentially torque the uterus. And that torque in the uterus can make it so there's not enough space for baby to flip. And so just by getting chiropractic care, women who have been in a breech position have been able to turn the baby and been able to deliver the baby successfully without any intervention at all. And of course, that's the key if we can get there. And so that's number one, chiropractic during pregnancy, to make sure that your hips are where they need to be. And then the second thing, of course, is when you have this 45-degree curve in your spine, when you start to develop a baby over here, and you can kind of take a look at the picture here, when that baby starts to develop, obviously you have kind of an abnormal load, right? So you have this big baby belly in front, and towards the end of pregnancy, your pelvic ligaments and joints become loosened. And they loosen, which is a good thing in order for the pelvis to open, the pelvic basin to open, and for you to be able to deliver, but it can loosen everything in the spine too. And that can cause tugging on the vertebra, which affects the lumbar nerve roots. And that can give you that sciatic pain. And that can also cause, issues wrapping around the front to the pubic bone as well. And so chiropractic, just awesome for pregnancy. And then making sure that those nerves that are supplying the baby and helping your baby to grow and develop properly in womb is so important too. So this is a topic that I wanted to hit on. I think it's really important. Many women might not really think too much about their birthing plan. Now, the extent of your plan and the detail of your birthing plan, it might differ based on who you decide to go and deliver with. Meaning, if your plan aligns with the hospital's plan, you probably don't have to have too much of detail in what you want. But if you're somebody who's looking for a natural delivery and you're going to deliver in a hospital, you better write out exactly what you want to make sure that your doctors, nurses, and significant other can make sure that that is followed through with. The same thing is true on the opposite end. If you want a more natural birth and that's just kind of the standard that your midwife has and your doula has, you might not have to write too much down. But I just wanted to give you some suggestions on things that you could have in a birthing plan, things that you might not even think of. And so, for example, you can choose to say, I don't want forceps or vacuum used. And so there are studies that show that mothers who use forceps and vacuum, they experience more trauma and complications following these interventions. It can also lead to things like bruising, bleeding, and even skull fractures in babies. And so especially if you're in a place like a hospital, you might want to write down no forceps, no vacuum. You might want to write down that you want to have immediate skin-to-skin contact. So there's so much literature that supports holding baby right after delivery and how that secures a bond between mom and baby. And it literally alters the chemistry, which allows the baby to feel secure and to be healthier overall. And so skin-to-skin contact has been proven to show improvements in breastfeeding, improvements just in overall fetal health, mental health for the mother, and of course, bonding overall too. With that, why wouldn't they let you have your baby right away? A lot of times it's because they want to do like an evaluation, an exam to make sure that baby is good to go. So that might be something you just want to bring up to your OB or your midwife that, hey, look, I want to kind of wait on the exam for a second just so that I can spend some time with my baby. With that, you also might choose to do breastfeeding right away. And so breastfeeding right away helps milk to come in a little bit easier, a little bit sooner. And again, it just kind of helps the bond between mom and babe overall. You also might choose to do a delay in cord clamping. And so, of course, that cord is the lifeline between mom and baby. And if through that cord you have red blood cells, you have white blood cells, you have all kinds of substances that are passing through there. And there is literature that shows that if you just leave that cord connection there a little bit longer, that has benefit to the baby as well. Some women choose to save their placenta. And so some moms save it and they make it into supplements. And that can be something that helps. It's very nutrient dense, and some women choose to save that. You can also choose not to have vitamin K. So vitamin K can either be in the form of an injection or it can be oral. As far as the injection goes, just to let you know, it is a Class C drug. It's unknown whether or not this is 100% safe during pregnancy, and it usually has about 5,000 times the recommended daily allowance of that vitamin K. So an oral vitamin K sometimes is a little bit better, and you can get it in smaller doses if you choose to do the vitamin K. Another thing to think about is perhaps circumcision for the baby. And so while a lot of people think circumcision is just the way that things are done, back in 1999, the American Academy of Pediatrics said that baby circumcision is not recommended as a routine procedure. So that might be something that you choose to look into as well. And then looking at eye ointment, delaying that. So sometimes they put some antibiotic drops in the eyes, and we know that antibiotics really disrupts gut health. So that might be something you want to think about. And you might want to think about the hepatitis B shot. And so unless mom has hepatitis B, it's very unlikely that baby will get hepatitis B. And so you might want to think about denying that. And then the very last thing I have written is bathing the baby. And so of course, when the baby comes out, they have that kind of white protective vernix is what that's called. And so you might want to think about just kind of letting things be natural for a little while and delaying bathing the baby as well. And so those are just some ideas. If you want any more information on that, please let me know. And if you want that article that I just referenced, let me know. Also, it has a couple other good suggestions in there. Those are just the ones that I highlighted for you. And so now we've had the baby, we've delivered, and now we are either a newborn or an infant, birth to 1 year old. And so at this time, you can expect your baby to start to smile, be a little bit more responsive, roll over, start to sit up, crawl, and maybe even take a few steps. And so during this time, it's also an incredibly precious time and wonderful time for mom and baby to experience breastfeeding together. And so breastfeeding has so many incredible benefits to it, not only for the baby, but also for the mom. And so for the baby, it's been shown that kids who are breastfed have better immune systems. They tend to have less ear infections, less asthma, less eczema, and allergies. Some studies suggest that they might have a little bit higher of IQs, and they just tend to be healthier overall. For mom, it helps you to lose weight, get back to your pre-baby weight. And so just breastfeeding burns 300 to 500 calories. And so it's definitely an activity. And it also helps to contract your uterus back to, again, pre-pregnancy status. And so research shows that if you're breastfeeding, your uterus tends to contract back in about 6 weeks. If you do not breastfeed, it can take as long as 12 weeks to kind of get back to pre-baby status overall. And so breastfeeding, just a really special and really, really important thing. I want you to think about this. Breast milk is literally God's food. So if you look at breast milk, and I don't know if you've ever seen any of these maybe posts or articles before, but the mother's innate intelligence changes the breast milk depending on what the baby needs. And so if you have had a baby who's maybe been sick and you've been breastfeeding, you might have actually experienced this. But for example, when a baby is sick, somehow the mom's innate wisdom knows, and it will change the milk, and the milk will change in color. You'll know this if you're kind of pumping and saving. It'll change in color, it'll change in consistency, and it'll change even in like taste and smell. So the breast milk changes based on what the baby needs. That's how intelligent the body is overall. Also, breastfeeding right away, especially right after delivery, is really nice. The kind of pre-milk that comes in, it's higher in protein, it's less in sugar, and so it helps to keep baby satiated for a little bit longer, and then it kind of changes as the full milk comes in overall. And so breastfeeding, a really special thing and a really important thing to do really as long as you can. Around 4 to 6 months is when we traditionally start to introduce foods. And so introducing foods is a really important topic, because conventional wisdom says that we should start with like cereals And conventional wisdom also has us going and getting brands like the Gerber foods that are in the little containers. But when you start to look at those foods and research behind those foods, there was a study that looked at 168 different baby foods, and 1 in 4 of them, 25% of them, had heavy metals in them. And so nearly every marketed packaged baby food contains toxic chemicals. And so that in and of itself is a reason to perhaps make your own food at home. And I do want to touch on cereals. I did a ton of research on this. And so there's one mama who asked me about this, and I'll be honest, I didn't know the answer. And so I did a lot of research within the past couple of weeks on this. I hope she's on the line. If not, I'm going to give her the information. But I don't think cereals are the best option to start your child on. And so the reason that so many pediatricians suggest cereals is mostly because during the time when baby is first born, there's really no source of iron, and your iron starts to get a little bit lower. And so cereals tend to be fortified with different nutrients like folate and iron. And so it's making sure that baby is getting that nutrient. It's also very bland, which, helps baby just to make sure that they're eating it. But what we're finding is the cereals are very high in arsenic, and that's not good, of course. And then also babies at that age, they don't really have the digestive enzymes necessary to get through and digest that cereal. And so that can cause a host of digestive issues. And so at that point, around 4 to 6 months, you have about 2/3 of your salivary amylase. So amylase is what's needed to break that cereal down. And so the amylase in your saliva is about 2/3 of the way in. That's not too shabby. But the big production of amylase happens in your pancreas, and pancreatic amylase isn't in full production until about 8 months. And so if you're introducing cereal really early at like 4 months, you're introducing digestive issues to your baby. And so I don't think cereal has any nutritional kind of basis for being the first food that your baby has. And so the foods that I suggest that you look into are going to be eggs, surprisingly. And so it's there's a research that I can send over for anybody who wants it that shows that eating eggs early actually creates an aversion to egg allergies in the future. So like a gently cooked egg that has the runny yolk, and that runny yolk is chock full of nutrients. It has so many good vitamins and minerals within that egg. And then the other major one would be beef liver, or just organic pureed beef or lamb. And so red meats have those nutrients that the cereal is fortified with. By the way, fortified means it's added in, not that it's naturally in there. And so naturally, grass-fed beef is going to have your folate and your iron and all of those good nutrients that you need. And so the way that you would give that to baby at 4 to 6 months is by cooking it, by blending it down and mixing it maybe with some broth or even some breast milk so that it's nice and runny in order to be able to give to baby. The other thing that's suggested is mashed ripe fruit. And so avocados are great, ton of high fats in them, which is a fantastic thing. And even bananas. And then as baby kind of cruises along to 8-9 months, you can start adding in your mashed veggies like your peas and your carrots and your butternut squash. And then even doing like yogurt and fermented things like sauerkraut is good to make sure that we're establishing good gut health. And so that is introducing foods. Another important thing to think about, most of us grew up on these traditional products like Dove. We grew up with traditional deodorant that has aluminum in it. We grew up with herbal essences and Aussie and whatever products you were used to using. And so again, I ask you the question, when do you wish you would have started taking care of yourself? When it comes to personal care products, we should never put a toxic personal care product on a baby's body. There's no reason to. There's so many good personal care products out there that don't have the toxins in them that their traditional ones do. And so do your research on this as far as like baby body wash goes, baby shampoo goes. Dr. Bronner's is really good. They have an unscented liquid soap that you can use. And then I would just be really careful as baby gets older, and even as we get into like the teen years, and the preteen years where we start using deodorant and things like that. We just want to teach our kids to use good quality products. And that's going to help us to decrease the toxic load, which will help your child to just be healthier overall. So screen time is a huge one. One of the blessings of being in our office is I get to be around a lot of young kids. But one of the things that I see now more than ever is, we had a little baby in here today who was literally glued to the screen. And so research shows that screen time before 18 months can have huge negative effects. It can affect reading, memory, sleep, attention, and language development. And so I would absolutely have zero screen time before 18 months. And even after 18 months, I think that we have to be really, really cautious with the screen time that we allow our children to have. And so keep in mind, technology is fairly new. And so what I mean by that is, computers and the internet really came around in the 90s, and we're only in, 2020. Is that where we're in right now? Yeah, 2020. So we're only here, 20, 30 years later, seeing the repercussions of not only like the blue light and what it's doing to our attention spans, but also where we're holding it and what that's doing to our spine and our nervous system overall. And so screen time before 18 months, it has to be completely none. I know that this is hard. And so it's especially difficult. It's not that it's hard. I would say it's more so probably just very easy to give your kids something that's going to occupy them. But what we need to teach our kids is learning on our own and playing on our own. And so the sooner you give screen time, what the research is showing is you're actually setting your children up for not being able to play on their own and to be independent in the future. And so what we want to do is help our kids to be independent and coming up with games and things to do so that as they get older, when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're not always having to put the television on, but they're able to just kind of be in their own space and doing things without you. And so it creates independence. It also supports creativity, and it supports just, better cognitive development overall. So minimizing that screen time. And then, of course, we really want to start chiropractic care young. And so mom getting adjusted while she's pregnant, very important. And then also baby getting adjusted right after birth. So even the most ideal births, your kids still went through the vaginal canal, and that still has an effect on the spine overall. And so with that, checking every child as soon as possible is so important. The youngest I've checked, I think, is about 24 hours old. But my own babies, when I have them, I will adjust them right after birth. And so all of my chiropractic friends, all of their children have been adjusted at just hours old. And in case you've never seen a baby get adjusted, it's the tiniest bit of pressure, enough to check the ripeness of an avocado or a tomato. That's all it takes. And so just clearing out that nervous system can, of course, prevent things like ear infections, colicky babies. Here, I'm going to go to this next slide here. But ear infections, colicky babies, asthma, trouble latching, children who are displaying signs of torticollis, where they're kind of turning their head to favoring one side versus the other side, reflux, constipation, sleep issues, respiratory issues. All of these things clear out, especially at birth. The reason being is there's not many other factors that are affecting the health at this point. Like, your child isn't hugely toxic unless you did a lot of really toxic things in your life and during the pregnancy. Your child hasn't been exposed to all of these bad foods for years. Your child isn't stressed, you know what I mean? And so at birth, the reason kids respond so great to chiropractic is because the number one cause of any health issue they're experiencing is they have damage in their nervous system. So clearing them out at birth just does huge things. I'll share with you a quick story. I have a friend of mine who helps with our marketing in the office. He lives in North Dallas, and he had been under chiropractic care for a while when his wife got pregnant with their first daughter. She's about 11 years old now. And when she went into labor, they went into the hospital, and she had a very, very, very difficult labor. They said that the baby was very deeply lodged in her pelvis. And so they went in and they did an incision to try to get her out via C-section. That incision wasn't work. She was so deep in, they had to do a second incision. The second incision didn't work. She was so deep in. They ended up inverting her, and they had 2 doctors pulling her out of the womb in order to deliver her. And so after all of this happened, doctor who delivered, the baby girl went and talked to my friend Chris and said, hey, look, this is kind of what happened. So what's going on with her now is she's got torticollis. And so her head is off to one side like this. She has paralysis in her arm, and her feet are kind of like turning up and out like this. And they said, but congratulations, you have a little baby girl. And he's like, okay, well, what do we do now? Like, how do we fix this? And they said, well, there's nothing we can do for her arm. There's nothing we can do for her feet. But what we can do for the torticollis is we will have you do some physical therapy with her. But if it doesn't get better, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll snip the muscles in her neck. That way her head comes back to center, but she'll never be able to really turn her head again in the future. And that's what they told her. And so luckily, Chris, having gone to chiropractors for a very long time, called his chiropractor right away and was like, hey, look, this is what happened. What can we do? And he came in that night to the hospital, adjusted the baby girl. And within 24 hours, she started turning her head back again. And he called, the doctor and said, hey, look, I don't know what you did, but whatever you did, that adjustment, it helped. Please come back and do it again tomorrow. And so he went back every day for the next week. And within 2 weeks, her feet were completely normal. She had full range of motion within her arm, and her head was completely back to normal as well. And so just keep in mind, damage during the delivery process has a big impact on the nerves. And if there's something going on right at birth, that's usually the cause of what's going on with that baby's condition, especially when it comes to something like torticollis or even something going on with the arm, etc. So just a quick story for you there. So now we move into the toddler years. So now we're 1 to 3 years old. And so now we're starting to walk by ourselves. We can hold and drink from a cup. Super exciting. We start to speak words. We start to speak in short phrases. And so in the toddler years, we see a couple of things. The first thing is picky eaters. And so about 25 to 35% of toddlers and preschoolers are said to be picky eaters by their parents. What I think a lot of parents don't realize is it takes, on average, 11 tries of a child trying a new food to accept it and like it. And so one thing to keep in mind with your picky eater is be persistent. And so give them the food over and over and over again, and try to give it to them in different ways. And so chocolate and cheese go a long way. And so covering something with some good grass-fed melted cheese when it comes to veggies, Brussels sprouts, or broccoli, that might help them to eat it. And then also like Lily's stevia sweetened chocolate. That can go a long way for eating some fruits if for some reason they don't like fruits, which I think most kids are more adverse to the vegetables. The other thing is cutting things up really tiny can make it a lot easier for your child to make things more palatable and make them want to eat it. But being persistent is really key. And then also celebrating them when they're eating and they are liking it. And so celebrate the wins and just kind of stick with them through it. And making sure that we're giving them a variety of different foods is really important. One of the things that you're going to get for tuning in here tonight, we can see everybody on the line, is we're going to email you a meal guide for your kids. It has a lot of great options in there. And then one thing I also posted, that especially if you have school age children, on our Facebook page, I posted 40 lunch ideas for you to pack for your kids to take to lunch. So that's a little bonus for you for tuning in. Another thing that we have to be mindful of within our kids is when we start to give them toys. And so we don't think of toys being toxic, but they certainly can be. And so plastic has things like formaldehyde, BPA, PVC, even lead can be found in your kids' toys. And so 1 in 3 tested kids' toys contain toxic chemicals. So instead of using plastic, it's good to go with wood. Toys are a little bit better. And then anything that has cloth, you just want to try to get some like organic cotton, good quality cloth. And then wood toys are really the best toys overall. If you're going to get plastic, which plastic is around us everywhere, you just want to make sure that it's BPA free. And that way, because, you think about your kids putting all that in their mouth and licking it, and you go into, let's say you leave your Legos in a hot car that have all these toxins inside of it. And when plastic heats up, that's when it releases the toxins, and then they sit there and they're doing whatever with it. So that's why you want to make sure that you're getting better quality toys for your children as well. So we move into the preschool years. And so this is 3 to 5 years old. And so at this point, your child starts to correctly name colors. They can form sentences. They're stringing together words that are 5 or 6 or sentences that are 5 or 6 words long. They're playing with other kids. They may speak a little bit more grammatically correct at this age. And so this is another age where it's really pivotal to think about the digital world. And so research shows that children between the ages of 2 and 5 watch on average of 32 hours of television. That's almost a full-time job of watching television every single week. And only about 5% of children meet their daily exercise recommendations. And again, I think that this is a new thing in the past 20, 30 years. It used to be, back in the Sandlot days that everybody was, outside playing with the neighborhood kids and on their bikes, and you were calling them in for dinner, and now we're sitting and we're on our video games and we're looking straight down at our devices that are right in front of us. We're even requiring kids to have, devices and computers as they start to go through school. And so we have to prioritize playtime in a digital world. And we're never going to fully get away from, the digital world that we're in. It's just a part of it. And there's a lot of pros that come with that. But realize the cons of that are, delaying really social development, and having just big impacts on the brain and how the brain is developing overall. And so as far as playtime goes, get your kid outside. And so make it a priority to go to the park. One of the things I'm going to say at the end of this is reward hard work with outside play. And so that gives your child an opportunity to get off excess energy. So if you have a child that's strong-willed, or you have a child that maybe has temper tantrums, it could be that they have this excess energy that they don't know what to do with. And so make sure that they're getting outside and they're moving their bodies. And then also that's giving them vitamin D, that's giving them fresh air, which is so important for just overall health and for immunity. And then also, it's teaching them to play with others, and it's teaching them that the world doesn't exist online. It's getting them away from the social media, which has a lot of mental impacts that we're going to talk about a little bit as well. And so just making sure that we're getting outside. I'd say around this age, it's important that kids are getting 2 to 3 hours of activity every single day. Bedtime. And so preschoolers need the most sleep out of almost any age group. And so they really need 11 to 13 hours of sleep every single night. As far as bedtime goes, just some tips for this. You have to make it a routine. And so kids should know exactly what to expect. Bedtime should be around the same time. And then creating a routine, not just for them, but for you, of, being in a cool room that's dark without electronics. So we put electronics away 2 hours before bed. That's a pretty good rule, not just for your kids, but for you. And making sure you're having that time for the mind to wind down. So a lot of us have heard of blue lights. And so blue light is the light that comes off of our technology, which is not bad during the day. It's actually a light that stimulates us to kind of wake up and be alert, but that is bad at night, and that can get in the way of sleep cycles. And so making sure that we have a routine and that we're taking the technology out of that routine is very important. So now we move on to school age children. And so now we're between 5 and 12 years old. So you're going to see a heightened ability to describe feelings, an increased desire to be accepted by peers, longer attention spans, and also an increase in independence overall. And so when we go to school, I think school these days is a little bit different than what school used to be. And so there tends to be added stress, even in your 5 to 12-year-olds. And what we're seeing more and more of is in this school age and going into high school are things like depression and anxiety. And so it's very important to make sure that the lines of communication are open with your child, and that your child has someone, if not you, but another adult figure that they feel like that they can confide in and talk to. And so it's not just the pressures of relationships and school work. It's also the fact that, again, a lot of this kind of comes back to technology, but we take in more information in a single day than a person did in their entire life in the 1400s. That's how much information we have coming at us. And that starts at a very young age. And so it's the stress of performing at school, the stress of learning at school. And then it's also the stress of social media, which paints this picture of a perfect life. We know that. I call it the highlight reels, where life isn't that perfect at home. And it also creates really this area for almost cyber and online bullying. And so it's really important to make sure that during this transition into school, that we're just talking with our kids and we're making sure that we're aware of these things that can come up. When we come into school age kids, we also start to see kids gain weight. And so childhood obesity is astronomical. 1 in 5 children and adolescents are considered obese these days. And when you look at the statistics, I don't know that I have these exactly in front of me, so I'm going to butcher them a little bit. But here we go. If you have a child who is so severely obese at the age of 2, they only have a 1 in 5 chance. That's a 20% chance of being a healthy weight by the time they're 35. If they remain obese until they're 5, their chances of being a healthy weight at 35 are 1 in 10% chance. And so again, it is these habits that we're teaching our children that are so important. And so obesity, comes from thinking it's okay to eat bad foods and from not promoting outside exercise, et cetera, with our children. And so we want to make sure that we're giving our kids good, healthy habits now so that we don't set them up for failure in the future. And a lot of that comes back to even our school lunches. And this is something that I'm pretty passionate about. Our school lunches are garbage. The same way it's incredible to me, it's a little tangent here, but it's incredible to me that somebody's going to be in the hospital for, who knows, cancer, stroke, heart disease, whatever it is, and the garbage they feed you in the hospital, and they expect you to get well, and they say, take these medications and eat this garbage, and that's their solution to healthcare. It doesn't make any sense. We're poisoning our children when it comes to the lunch that they're being served in our schools. And so it's very important to make sure that we're giving kids the foods that they need in order to develop, of course. But something that I also feel very strongly about is we have to teach our kids how to think. So it's not just telling our kids, hey, this is good and this is bad, but it's actually giving your child options and explaining the why behind it. And so saying, for dessert, would you rather have an apple with some almond butter, or would you rather have the ice cream? And then they choose the ice cream. And when they have a bellyache over the ice cream, you kind of say, hey, look, do you see why the ice cream wasn't the best choice for eating? And do you see why we should make healthy choices, otherwise? Or I was talking with some friends of mine over the weekend. I was at a personal development seminar, and one of their kids, kids say funny things. One of their kids says, well, when Mima comes over, why is it that she always, is eating fast food and we're not allowed to have fast food? And so they say, well, Mima has diabetes and Mima is overweight and she's in pain. And so if you want to eat that, just understand that you might get diabetes and you can gain weight and you can be in pain. Is that what you want for yourself? And so starting to teach our kids the right things to eat, that way we can cultivate those habits for them in the future. Juice Plus has this awesome system for teaching young kids how to eat. They call it like the red light, yellow light, green light system. And so they label foods in a fun way. They label them green light foods, meaning foods that are really good to eat. Red light foods, meaning like we don't eat those, like McDonald's red light food, or yellow light foods, meaning like foods that we can have once in a while. And they use that system with their kids to kind of make it a fun thing for what they're eating and how they're navigating this world of nutrition. So just an idea in there. So now we move on to teenagers. So we have kids who are 12 to 18 years old. Of course, we have increased independence. We have essentially, young adults who are starting to set goals and starting to have their own views of the world, their own expressions, their own feelings, their own sense of right and wrong. And so the big thing that we see with teens is really stress. And so again, in that 5 to 12-year-old realm of starting school, it certainly gets amplified as we are hormonal and and as we are really conscious of what the world is thinking of us overall. And so again, even more important at this point, to have somebody who, is in a kid's life, to be able to mentor them and to have open communication with them. A lot of times I think this is why things like hobbies and organized sports are really good, to have coaches involved in a kid's life, or somebody who's really mentoring a kid overall. And then sleep is also something really important. And so I think most of us know that sleep is when our body is able to heal. And I can tell you personally, growing up, my parents would wake us up at like 7:30 in the morning on Saturdays, and we'd be like, what in the world is going on? And we would not get the sleep that we needed. And so teenagers tend to sleep longer. They don't sleep as long as the preschoolers, who need like 11 to 13 hours, but very typical for a teenager to sleep 8 to 10 hours. And so that's kind of the range that they need in order for their bodies to be able to process through and be healthy, for them to have good mental health and good physical health overall. So we're looking at about 8 to 10 hours for teens. And so we're in a little bit of a different time right now, aren't we, with COVID, especially if you have young kids who are at home, and especially if you're working at home. The dynamics of schooling has changed. There are definitely some parents who have sent their kids back to school this week, which is fantastic, and they're excited about it. And then there's some parents who are starting this Zoom thing for the next little while, or even indefinitely. And so this is kind of hard to read here, but here are some tips for making life at home a little bit easier. Number one is having a schedule, especially if you have kids who are a little bit older, to follow the schedule. If you can let them know, like, this is what you're doing at home all day long, that helps so that kids aren't just laying around on the couch all day. And it helps to make sure that the days are productive, and it will keep kids on track for when they go back to school as well. And so again, getting up at the same time every single day, having a healthy breakfast, meal prepping with your children. Again, we're going to give you that Max Kids recipe book, and then getting outside in the morning or in the middle of the day and preparing, rewarding work with outside play, and then preparing that independent work for kids and starting to foster that development of independent play is going to be really important for development in your child as well. And then again, minimizing that screen time, and then maybe even having lunch together if that's something that you can do. There's also some really cool resources online where you can do like virtual tours at zoos, or I think NASA even has something cool. And so just getting creative with plugging into different moms groups, Facebook groups, for what you can kind of schedule your child to learn, and the activities, activity books, et cetera, that you can kind of schedule them out to do. And then again, rewarding that work with play. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this screen here and hop back over to you guys. And then let me know, do you have any questions? And so I'm going to scroll back through here, and also let me know if there's one thing that stood out to you that you learned. If you enjoyed this workshop, feel free to comment on that as well, or if you have any questions overall on anything that we just talked about. So I'm super pumped that you guys are here. Hello to everybody. Going back through here. Elisa, I think that's awesome that you're breastfeeding. And so, man, you can breastfeed for a long time. So keep it up. That's so awesome. Any questions at all? All right. So yeah, absolutely, Amanda. Thank you for the comments. If you have any questions, let me know. So I don't know if I just cut out or not. Awesome. Thank you, Michelle, for the comment. So, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and log off here. If you guys have any questions in the office, or if you need anything, just let me know, okay? You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for tuning in, guys.